About on Easter to a room full of Unitarian Universalists? Question. I've talked about those women whose faith was stronger than the men's, clearly, who were the first to see the empty tomb, to tell the story of what had happened, or to question, at least, what had happened. I could talk for an age about ruthless, tyrannical empire killing a poor man who stood up to them, which seems more and more relevant every single year. And I'll mention those things, but today I did want to talk about practicing resurrection, which is a funny thing to say to UUs, I know. What does it mean for us to practice resurrection? What do those words mean? There's so much power, so much meaning, so much for us to consider in that. What would that mean for us? And so I ask you for a few minutes to explore that with me. Keeping in mind, of course, that you have freedom of the pew to agree or disagree with me, to believe or not believe, just as I have freedom of the pulpit to share it with you either way. So we'll keep in mind that for each of us, these words might mean something a little different, and that we don't have to be bound by what anyone else thinks or says this means, including top-of-the-line me. So Christians around the world celebrate today the resurrection of Jesus, who died standing up to that authoritarian government I mentioned a moment ago. His return 3 days later has been endlessly retold and debated and mined for greater meaning. If you go far enough back in the etymology of the word resurrection, you find its roots in the idea of making right, making things right. And that's really important. When we speak of resurrection, we speak of making things right again. And so much of our own faith is about this. We're a covenantal people. We make promises to one another. We do our best to fulfill those promises. We fail sometimes. And we come back again to make things right as best we can. We're not a congregation or a religious movement that requires you to be perfect. In fact, if we do have any perfect people here today, I'm not sure my message will have a lot of meaning for you. But what we do require is the commitment to try, and especially the commitment to try again, the resolve to come back to the table when we've failed. So on Easter, I think of those earliest followers of Jesus who must have been heartbroken, no doubt, desperately seeking meaning in his tragic death. Where, after all, could the hope be in that? Well, the hope is that love does not die. Hope continues. Possibility still springs forth. Because it is a lot easier to crucify a person than an idea. And the idea, or at least part of it, is the idea of making things right, of fixing or reforming, we might say, our idea of what the world should be. Think of the Beatitudes Jesus told us, in which he lifts up the poor and the meek, the outcasts, as those who will be most blessed. Or in Luke 23, where the criminal who is crucified along with Jesus asks Jesus to remember him. And Jesus assures him they will be together in paradise. So what is a reframing this work of making the world as we wish it would look like? Well, I'm afraid to tell you, it looks like a lot of work. It looks like practice. Practice in a very particular meaning. Some of you sports fans, especially Philly sports fans, will recognize what I'm about to say. I think of a famous moment by the former NBA star Allen Iverson, who, when his work ethic in practice was questioned, exploded in one of the all-time great sports rants. He criticized those who worried more about what he did or didn't do in practice than in the games he played, where he was universally known for his toughness and his effort. I had a lot of sympathy for his viewpoint, and I still do, because I think he gets something important, which is we have mistaken what the word practice means. It's not preparation for what we do, it is what we do. So when Iverson spoke, he said, "Judge me on how I do the thing that I do, not on what I do or don't do to prepare for it." And I think of this a lot in our own daily spiritual practices, whether we think of them that way or not. I don't think of spiritual practices as something we do to prepare ourselves for the real work. Those practices are our real work. To practice is to do. The point of gardening is not the end product, it's the process. If you don't love the process, well, you're never going to get to the end product with gardening, is my experience. So when we speak of our spiritual practices, we're speaking of what we do, who we are, what is central to us being the people we are and the people we wish to be. So today, on Easter, when I say that we have to practice resurrection, this is what I speak of making things right in our world every day. What Jesus worked for in his whole life. Because, and it's an indictment on those of us who wish to be perfect, Jesus didn't hang out a lot with people who had it all together. He hung out with the poor and the outcasts and the marginalized folks. I remember, this is a little bit of a side, but stay with me. I was just about to start seminary, and I was out. I used to work night shifts, so I was out very late at a bar because we had just gotten off work. And I was sitting at a table with someone I didn't know well, and one of my friends mentioned, "Oh, he's going to start seminary soon." And the guy just stared at me for a moment and said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, you got to go where the business is, right? I mean, you know, you got to go find the people who need it, not the people who don't need it." Anyway. Jesus, and I'm not comparing myself to him, but Jesus hung out in the wrong part of town, on the wrong proverbial side of the tracks. We practice resurrection every day when we choose life over death, when we value every single life among us, when we care about, yes, the one person, because the one person, to save one person is to save the whole world. When we fight for a Maryland man to be returned from El Salvador. We practice resurrection when we rise up again, when we go out in the streets to hold our government and our society, and yes, ourselves to our highest ideals. We practice resurrection when we go outside of our comfort zone, when we try new things, when we make connections with people we wouldn't have thought of doing so before. In short, when we take risks. We practice resurrection when we try and we fail and we try again. And when we acknowledge that we have not been our best selves, when we have not been the community we aspire to be, and we recommit to the work of doing better. So this Easter day, and for all the days to come, I invite you to practice resurrection, the work of making things right in our world. May it be so. Amen.